All right, now, as I said, a real stand-up guy and a guy that is right inside our national security needs. Let's go to Congressman Peter King. Congressman, welcome to the Malsberg Show. Good to talk with you again.
Good to be with you.
Well, Congressman, we saw the CNN Benghazi interview and now the entrails of that today. What do you take away from the fact that a CNN reporter could meet with this guy that the FBI apparently wants to talk with in a coffee shop?
A number of us have known about this for a while. It's absolutely indefensible. I have, in the past few weeks, asked people in positions of authority, I said, how do we explain this? How do you intend to explain this if this person ends up carrying out a terrorist attack and Americans are killed, innocent people are killed because we didn't take the action? This person is hiding in plain sight. It's just, I can't give you an answer. I can just say that this is caught up in a government bureaucratic, it's just, again, inexplicable. It's like one part of the government blaming the other part and nothing being done. I basically, to be honest with you, I'm not trying to make this partisan. This is when, to me, the commander-in-chief has to step in and say action has to be taken. I mean, basically call 3 or 4 people into his office and say, one of you has got to get this done. There's different agencies involved. There's different, and just do it. I mean, there's no excuse. This shouldn't take more than 24. This should have been done months ago. It shouldn't take more than 24 hours now to get the job done.
Congressman, too, the time issue here, shockingly, when we saw no Americans that could have come to the aid of these guys over 7 or 8 hours, which is hard to believe. And I believe we're having a retiring general talking about this behind closed doors today. What can you give the American public? Give us a sense of where that part of this is going to figure out why the military didn't respond.
Well, let me just say that the administration has been very successful in dragging this out, and so much now that a good number of the American people think this is old news and think somehow Republicans are trying to make a phony scandal out of Benghazi. So right now the administration is winning this battle. They really are, and it's terrible to say. But we just have to keep it up. We cannot listen. There are scandals and the scandals. There's mistakes and there's mistakes. But when you have 4 Americans dead, to me, everything else should stop until you find out why it happened, why it was allowed to happen, make sure it never happens again, and go after those who are responsible. This goes beyond the realm of politics. It goes beyond the realm of give and take and back and forth. In the years I've been in Congress, this is to me, one of the most egregious errors, not even so much because the mistake was made in the first place, and the mistakes. And, let's face it, in life, in government, whatever, sometimes mistakes happen. But the fact that from the first moment on, there's been a cover-up, that's what's absolutely...
Yeah, and Congressman, I get it. Maybe they shouldn't have been there. Who knows what mistakes, or maybe there wasn't enough security, but not riding to the rescue. That's the part that is inexcusable. Now, let me turn to you. I've seen you on a couple of national shows recently. Putting your foot in the water potentially as a presidential candidate, if you did run, what would be the portfolio? What would be the animating issue driving Peter King to throw his hat in?
The main reason would be that we have to do away with political correctness when it comes to fighting terrorism. We have to put American interests first. We can't be worried about what the New York Times is going to say. We can't be worried about the United Nations is going to say. We have to do what's right for America, and that means taking aggressive action when we think it's in our national interest to take it. And by taking aggressive action, I'm talking about systematic and targeted operations. That ends up saving lives in the long run. It reduces the chances of a larger war. And basically, it's to stop apologizing for America and doing whatever has to be done here and overseas to defeat terrorism.
Hey, and toward that end, I would appoint today, if I had the power, Ray Kelly, the head of Homeland Security. I think that would be a spectacular, finally saying we're putting an unbelievably competent person in charge.
Ray Kelly is a superstar. He and I actually went to grade school. He was 2 years ahead of me, so I didn't know him at the time. And my father did train him actually in the police academy. So I've known Ray for a long time. But more important than that, he's a great commissioner. What he has done is he has set up such a counterterrorism unit in New York, an intelligence unit, that they've stopped 60 different attacks against New York. And on crime, we used to have over 2,000 murders a year in New York. Now we're down below 400. And you know what the result of all this is? The Civil Liberties Union and CARE and the New York Times, the Associated Press are all either suing or attacking Ray Kelly for. They accuse him of profiling. They accuse him of violating civil liberties and civil rights. He has the best record of any commissioner in the country. And when you take the fact that we had over 2,000 people killed in previous years, going back into the 80s and early 90s, and now it's down to 400, and when you realize that the overwhelming majority of victims of crime in New York are African-American men, young men in particular, think of all the African-Americans who are alive today in New York because of Ray Kelly's policies, yet the civil rights groups are attacking him and accusing him of profiling and bias and racism. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Well, and Congressman, in Philadelphia, we have people wanting to model what you guys do in New York, which is to put a mandatory penalty on if you have an illegal weapon, and I agree with that, but isn't it the stop and frisk program with probable cause? Isn't that really what's been the driving force here?
It certainly is. One, it takes guns off the streets. It goes into neighborhoods. It reassures people. But more than that, it tells the bad guys they can't go out of the streets.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been a total success. And also with terrorism, the department has done a phenomenal job. But on crime, the police have taken the streets back. I tell you, I grew up in New York City. My father was a city cop. 30 years ago, you couldn't find anyone who was willing to go in the city late at night, to take the subways, to hang out, to go into different neighborhoods, to go to Times Square. Times Square, you had to race through in your car and hope that you didn't.
Yeah, well, I'm from Philadelphia, and I'd rather be in downtown Manhattan where I'm doing this show with my wife. We were in Times Square last night, and I'm a family of all cops. So, yeah, exactly. Now, one quick parting area where maybe we're not in some disagreement, but I really wanted to hear you about Rand Paul on the one side, Governor Christie on the other, and you've been sort of in some of this, and Rand Paul said on my show he'd do a beer summit with Governor Christie. That'd be a good thing to do, I think.
It's up to Governor Christie. I mean, Rand Paul did go after Governor Christie in a way for that whole gimme thing. But again, I'm not going to tell Chris Christie what to do. He and I have had occasional differences, not really on substance, more on personality. Maybe we're too much alike. But I think this is a good debate to have for the party. And, Chris Christie is a tough guy, and I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent debate because, I'm watching carefully Rand Paul. If he goes the way of his father, Ron Paul, I'm not there. But I'm very concerned about civil liberties, the tension between that, and yet giving our law enforcement every opportunity to stop the bad guys. What do you tell listeners here about the NSA and these stories every day, Congressman, that seem to indicate that this is pretty intrusive?
Yeah, actually, I'd say most of those stories are, in fact, almost entirely when it comes to the specifics, are not true. I mean, no American's phone call is listened to by the NSA. Nobody's emails are looked at in this country by the NSA. And no emails have even been collected by the NSA. What they do collect is the phone numbers of calls back and forth with no names, no addresses, just the numbers and the duration of the call and the date. And then if a terrorist number comes in from overseas, they drill it down to see if they've spoken to anyone in the U.S. At that stage, they're allowed to look to see what other numbers they called, but then if they want to listen in the future, they have to go to the FBI. The FBI has to go to court and get a warrant to listen. So the NSA is really stockpiling or storing up numbers and for the purpose of when a future call comes in involving terrorism, that they can drill down on it.
Hey, hope to see you on the presidential trail. You would add a lot to the race, Congressman. Thank you very much for joining us.
I'll be up in New Hampshire this weekend, up in Carroll County in Wakefield. So.
Have a good time there. Thank you, Congressman.